requisitions?
I'm fine with them.
And yes.
Okay. Is there anything else to add on to that?
I have nothing.
Tiffany?
No.
All right, we start with a work session with Chris Broush.
Morning.
Morning, Commissioners. Thanks for making time for us today. I wanted to get together for about 15 minutes. I think I have 15 minutes on the agenda. Is that correct, Tina?
Actually, you have,
Yeah, we're not gonna give him 30 minutes. Go
yeah,
ahead.
you have 15.
Okay. We'll make it quick. Great, okay. Well, I wanted to just bring the board up to speed on a couple projects that are going on with the county. And one in particular is, here, I'll take that. One in particular is the Foster's project. It's a sewer project that's going on. I've got actually a graph here showing it, the location of it. I don't know if you've ever been down there where the Terwilliger Bridge is. Are you familiar with the Terwilliger Bridge? If you ever go across the bridge, I don't know if you ever take a look on the left
You can
side.
go ahead and say it. It's the monkey bar.
No, I'm not talking about the monkey bar. There's a
there,
monkey bar
right?
down there?
Isn't it?
Oh, yeah, there is a bar. Yeah. But no, I'm not talking about the monkey bar. I'm talking about the bridge next to the monkey
The monkey
bar.
bar.
Okay. And if you ever drive across that bridge, you'll see two pipes that are hanging on that bridge, and they've been hanging on that bridge forever. And if you talk to the former county sanitary engineer, he'll tell stories about how one morning he got a phone call about how those pipes are not hanging on the bridge. Some truck had hit the pipes, and they had knocked the pipes off into the river. And so, I mean, there's some stories that go back as far as the way this is set up. But if you look at, they're decent-sized pipes. One's, I think, a 20, both maybe 24-inch pipes, and they're all rusty in. But the way it works is that we use those aerial crossings to push both drinking water and sanitary water across, sewer water across from one side of the river to the other. A year and a half ago, we took a look on ways to try to eliminate those pipes and also build additional capacity, both on water and sewer. Because the way it works, and that's what you see here, is you see the map there. You see the map showing the dashed line there. That's the aerial crossing. On the right side of the river of the map, you see Bear Run Lift Station. On the left side, you see Foster's Lift Station. And basically the way we work it out is we pump sanitary flow, everything, all the flow from Hamilton Township and the Village of Morrow makes its way to the Bear Run Lift Station. It collects in the lift station, we pump it across the river to Foster's, and then we pump it again up the hill to the Lower Little Miami treatment plant.
Yeah, and you were talking about potentially putting it underwater.
Yeah, we talked about, hey, let's get rid of Bear Run, let's go with the gravity sewer. So we looked at a couple different options because this whole area, this whole area is growing, and we've got a ton of customers coming in, a ton of new residents in Hamilton Township. We've got growth up in Morrow area, and all that flow gets down to here. So we need to expand our capacity and push flow over to the treatment plant. So we hired an engineering firm a year ago, which is Burgess and Neipolt. They took a look at all these different options. They looked at gravity sewer, and then we even hired on a contractor, which is Shook Construction, through the CMAR process, because we're marrying our engineer up with our contractor to come up with solutions out here. Well, we got the study done, and what I want to give you is the results, real quick results of the study. And we looked at 3 different options. One option is gravity by microtunnel under the river, where we would set up a bore machine at the Foster site and microtunnel across the river to Bear Run. And this would be a new gravity sewer. That was very expensive. That came out to be $14.9 million. All right. So we said, all right, let's forget the fancy microtunnel. Let's just open cut the river. That cost is estimated at $9.3 million. So we said, all right, let's look at just upgrading what we're doing now and just put bigger pumps in Bear Run Lift Station and keep those lines hanging on the river. That cost $6.5 to $7 million. So our recommendation moving forward is, with the cost of everything the way it is and all the other capital projects that we have on the horizon, we're recommending that we continue running the Bear Run Lift Station and just upgrade the lift station and keep the aerial crossings on the bridge and go with the least expensive option, which is $6.5 to $7 million. So that's our recommendation. That's what we plan to do. I mean, the cost savings there is significant. And keeping everything on the bridge, continue pumping, using Bear Run and pumping across the bridge. Environmentally, it's the least invasive. We're not in the river. We keep the regulators happy. We keep ODNR happy. We're not, tearing up the river corridor, trying to put a gravity sewer across the river.
How big of a deal is the open cut of the river? I mean, would natural resources even let us do that? In that where you block it off for some period of time and you channel around it and you dig and?
We have open cut that river once before, and that was back when we put a 24-inch water line across 48, where we made our north-south connection on our water line. So we've put a water line in, open cut, but the situation here is they're not going to look favorably at this at all, because we had a survey done of mussels along the river, and we came up and found a big mussel bed at this location where we would be open cutting the river, and ODNR is very adamantly opposed to that. So they will have a very hard time allowing us to open cut the river.
But in the big picture, it's fine now, it works, it's not the prettiest thing having two big pipes there, but I'm a little more concerned that if something were to happen to that bridge, if something crazy happened, if all of a sudden those pipes fall, and that's our epicenter of sewage, that's literally just gonna be draining straight into the Little Miami.
Yeah, I mean, you always have hazards no matter what you build. There's always a potential of something failing, and you see that, and that's where you hate to have that the lack of redundancy, but in these infrastructure items, I mean, that's the risk you run. I did talk to the engineer's office, and the engineer's office reports that bridge is in very good shape, that they don't have any plans for making any significant improvements to the bridge. It's in very good condition. We've gone out and looked at the structure, the aerial crossing, and the way it's secured on there. It's secured on there very, very well. As part of this upgrade, we will go through and evaluate that again and paint the pipe and make sure everything's in good condition moving forward. But that is, I mean, I understand your concern. We try to minimize that as much as we can by making sure it's designed and in good condition.
Is there anything that exists that we could wrap it somehow? Can we encase it? Can we, there's one thing of building some sort of structure around it that just in case something crazy happened or whatever, it would give one more level of protection. But is there any type of wrapping that exists? I mean, the new technology is so much different than it was 50 years ago.
Right. It's not so much the wrapping. It is stout pipe. It is ductile iron pipe. It is held on by secure pipe stanchions that's bolted on to the steel of that bridge. I guess, Dave, it's not much different than when you go out to, say, like a big city, and you look in Chicago, and you look at some of the understructure of these train trestles and stuff, and they've got pipes hanging all the time, all over the place. So it's no different than, we're not doing anything crazy that's not been done, 1,000 other places. And if anything, repairing something like this on the bridge may be easier to do than, say, like a water line that's buried, in a, 20 feet under the river. You're not going to be able to repair that. But if it's on this bridge structure, at least you can visually see the condition of it, and you can get out there and make some improvements if you have to. So there's, I know that there's a concern of, hey, this is, you're putting all your eggs in one basket, but you can't build redundancy for everything. And the way this is set up, you can actually see the condition of those water lines.
Well, I'm just thinking redundancy, but I mean, yeah, the bridge fails, something, whatever crazy happened with the bridge, the pipes fall, I mean, yeah, I understand it. I'm just trying to think of, well, wait for, is there a way of, yes, that's the lowest cost, kind of easiest way of doing it, I get that, but is there a way of, from the outside, with the current structure, encasing it, giving one more layer of protection that just in case something snapped, this fell, something fell on top of the bridge and all of a sudden it broke,
Yeah.
something crazy like that happened? Or is there even, with redundancy, just putting in a backup pipe from the same infrastructure on either side of the river that you put up, just hang a pipe from the other side that just in case something happened with that pipe, this is the time that it's easy to divert the flow or something? I mean, would that be fairly low cost to put in a backup?
Well, a backup would have to be like directionally drilling a new line underneath the river.
No, I'm saying even a backup, just in case the pipe itself falls, would there be any upside of having a backup pipe even on the same structure on the other side of the bridge or something?
You could, but I mean, if the question
If
is
the bridge
what's
fails,
going to
then
fail? If the bridge fails,
They're
you're
both
out of
gonna
luck.
fail.
They're both going to fail. The way it's designed now is like you can get to those pipes, so if something is failing, you'll see it, you'll see a leak or something, and then you'll go and address it.
And there's alerts, obviously, something fails there, you're gonna know very quickly, and what do? You literally just turn off the pipe at one of the lift stations, and then there's,
Yeah, so, we would shut the lift station down and then, make emergency repairs as quickly as we could, so.
What would likely happen is if we have a bypass pump situation,
Right.
Chris, come on up.
If you remember, we had a situation down here at the Foster's lift station back in 2019, I think it was, where a contractor drilled into our 24-inch force main at Foster's going up to the treatment plant. And in that unfortunate event, which happened in July and August, we had to bypass that whole lift station into the river for probably, I'd say, 36 hours. While, that took us to get a contractor out there. The break was in a god-awful location, and, we had to get a specialty firm out there, Televac, to go in and patch that line in place. And it was, in that situation, unfortunately, there's no other options. You have to bypass the river. You hate doing it, but, overall, the environmental impact is for a short duration, and you issue health warnings, and you get the work done, and you move on, and you try to protect the health of the public as much as you can by issuing health warnings. So, unfortunately, in the business that we have, in the magnitude of all your infrastructure, you can't design against everything. You're going to have to be reactive. So.
And that was just a little bit different. That was the last peak, like basically the last point before you have to pump up the hill. In this situation, we've had a bypass before where they would allow us to put temporary piping. Basically, it's flex, kind of like flex hose, and you'd be pumping more often. It's not going to be as large, but you'd float it across the river in a temporary manner. We have several contacts with like Blue Tank and all these people that have bypass pumping that we can get them out here in no time. So no, it's still not an ideal situation, but it can be mitigated.
So you're thinking about the contingencies. I just want,
we always, yeah.
So our recommendation is to proceed forward with the project and, but keep the Bear Run lift station in operation, make improvements to that lift station, and continue pumping across the bridge. Keep the aerial crossings, both the water and the sewer aerial crossing on the bridge, and then make improvements to both stations to buy us the additional capacity we need. I mean, we would love the micro tunnel. I mean, we could make the front page of the micro tunnel boring machine magazine, you know, but yeah, it's just way too expensive.
And usually through the process of working with ODNR and Ohio EPA, you have to go through this analysis of your 3 different options. And when they see the cheapest option is the least environmentally impactful, it would be a very difficult sell to do either one of the first 2.
Well, I was almost thinking that if they are so opposed to the open cut, then, okay, states have flooded with all this extra money right now, you know, are you gonna pay the difference between those 2 to have a micro tunneling project? But you're saying, no, it's just the opposite, they're like, do nothing to the river, you know, keep doing what you're doing.
I'm not aware of the state willing to open up their budget for something like this. You know, there's a lot of funding out there from the state, but it's controlled pretty tightly as far as where it goes. So I've never heard of the state, you know, doing some bartering negotiations on this. Never
Why
seen
would the
that.
state be, other than the money, why is the state would object to a microtunnel? That wouldn't affect
No,
mussels.
the state would not object at all to that. They'd be in favor of that. But they're opposed to open cutting the river just because of the environmental impact and the fact that there was a significant mussel colony found in the river right at that location.
All right, so how long have we had this pump across the bridge business? That been decades they've been doing?
Decades, absolutely.
So it's been successful for decades. And there's
I'd say probably the late 80s.
late
Yeah.
80s, okay. And the microtunnel, besides being underground and out of sight, are there any other advantages to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's for our crews, there's a significant advantage to it. You know, our crews don't have to operate the Bear Run lift station. We have less physical assets. Instead of relying on a mechanical device at the Bear Run to push the flow, we're allowing gravity to take its course. So there's some non-cost factors that are advantages, but, you know, those non-costs can add up. You know, we're not gonna save, you know, what's the difference there? $7 million.
$8 million.
Yeah, we're not going to realize an $8 million saving in our operations to offset the additional capital cost. So just wanted to bring the board up to speed as far as the direction we're taking on this. In case you ever get a question on, hey, why are these pipes hanging on this bridge? Well, this is why. It's very
If we were to do the microtunnel, we would pay for that through our account for water and sewer through rate structure, is that right?
Yeah, so you could, you know, certainly, you know, try to finance it through our rate structures, but if we push it on to our customers, then we have a ton of other projects that we're trying to do. And so this would probably force us to increase some of our rates in order to do the micro tunnel.
Probably, or you know it would?
We'd have to take a step back. Everything is costing more nowadays. I mean, right now, we're doing, you know, a $7 million upgrade on the Sycamore Trails treatment plant. We have some solid processing options, and, you know, we have to do something with our biosolids. We have some improvements at some of our other treatment plants that are very expensive. So if we head down this path and try to spend $7 million extra, then we're gonna have to take a look at our rate structure and possibly push that, you know, increase our rates more in order to finance something like this. Or you can take money out of the general fund and give it to us, but we really don't advise that. We like our customers to pay for, you know, to be self-sustaining.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, it's just, I think we're contemplating it simply because this is the cheapest time to ever do that. You know, because it's, instead of, oh, we do this and then something fails, something goes wrong, and then we even end up doing it, okay, then a few years from now or what have you, all of a sudden it's a full 16 or 17 million dollars down the road, as opposed to the real
Right.
difference. It was just an extra $8 million to do it today, was what, does it make any sense to do that? If that's, because you do save the money of the lift station, but that's 50
It's-
grand a year or something?
Yeah, $100,000 or something like that, but, at the most. I mean, electric bill with pumps, pump replacement, stuff like that is my guess. It's probably,
Are there any plans in the future of changing that bridge? That bridge is gonna remain there?
I did reach out to the engineer's office, and they don't have any immediate plans for upgrading the bridge. That's the last thing I wanted to do, is I didn't want to head down this path and then find out, oh, by the way, Chris, hey, we're putting a new bridge in, and it's gonna cost you $1 million to move all your water lines. So no, there's no immediate plans. Neil, the engineer, county engineer, doesn't have any plans for upgrading the
Yeah,
bridge.
because we're doing one bridge right now, and that's gonna last us for quite a while. I have a
Yeah.
feeling changing one crossing over the Little Miami as we speak, and it's gonna take at least 20 years to probably do another one.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we need to do anything today about this?
No, I'm not looking for formal action on anything. I just wanted to bring the board up to speed as far as, because this project was heading down one path and we're now taking a right turn. Still heading in the same direction, but our approach is a little bit different. Okay? The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is US EPA issued a health advisory on some chemicals that they've been tracking. And you may recall this, before the pandemic in the news, this was pretty big back in 2018, 2019, because of the PFAS chemicals that they found up in the water supply in Dayton area. So I don't know if Wright-Patterson, I don't know if this rings a bell with you at all, but there were some chemicals found in Wright-Patterson. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base had used firefighting foam up on their base, and there was some contamination of the groundwater there with these PFAS chemicals. It's called Forever Chemicals. They're polyfluorinated chemicals. And then the city of Dayton actually is in lawsuits with, I think, the Air Force Base, trying to remediate some of these chemicals that are out there. Well, it was a big concern in 2019. Governor DeWine went through a whole process of testing everybody's water, and then US EPA last week came out with health advisories and saying that they're going to start requiring municipalities and water utilities to remove these chemicals in the near future. They're actually going to come down with regulations at the end of this year, proposed regulations. And some of these chemicals are like, it's the action level they're saying is like incredibly low, okay? So it's a whole does this ring a bell, PFAS? Have you heard of this? Okay. So what I have, I'm gonna give you this. I'm gonna give you a printout of the advisory. And so Governor DeWine went through and tested everybody's water in the state of Ohio 2 years ago, 2020. For the constituents, I think it was PFAS, it was PFOA, PFOS, PFBS, and a couple other chemicals that they tested. We actually came up with a hit on one of our, at one of our treatment plants, that we did actually come up with a reportable level of this. And back then it was in parts per trillion, okay? The action level, if you look at the spreadsheet here, or the slide here, the interim levels that they're having for PFOA is 0.004 parts per trillion. Parts per trillion, 0.004 parts per trillion. I don't know if you remember your like high school chemistry or college chemistry. Parts per trillion, I mean, you did milligrams per liter, which is parts per million, and then you have billions, and then you have trillions. So, and then you're even smaller than trillions, you're 0.004 parts per trillion. They're essentially saying you can't have any of this chemical in any of your water. and that if you do have this chemical in the water, then, people need to do something. So, last night I was trying to figure out how do I measure parts per trillion, 0.004 parts per trillion? How do I wrap my head around that, And so I started thinking, all right, well, giving you an example, what's like, if you look at distance to the moon, is that 1 trillion miles? No, it's like 238,000 miles to the moon, all right? And then I said, well, that's okay. It's not in miles. Let's go with feet.
But they're measuring it. So if they measured it and they're saying not to do it,
But I'm trying to give you an example of what the level that is. How fine that parts per trillion is.
but is it discretionary? Do we get to argue that it's too small for us to worry about?
No, they're going to come out with, in this fall, they're going to come out with proposed regulations, proposed concentrations that treatment plants are going to have to meet in order to be compliant. So they're going to start giving us concentration levels at our treatment plants that we're going to have to measure and we're going to have to meet, okay? And these concentration levels, parts per trillion, 0.004 parts per trillion, you can't even measure that. They recognize that there's no way to even measure that fine a chemical, that concentration level.
So if we can't determine whether we've got it at
So-
that level, how do we prove that we don't have it?
We had 1 or 2 hits on one of the chemicals, and it was, I think 6 parts per trillion. Not 0.0, so which is higher than the 0.004 or the 0.02 parts per trillion. So it's essentially, to give you an idea how fine that is, if you took paper, a ream of paper, and you stacked a ream of paper from here to the moon, all right? A full ream of paper, just took paper and stacked it all the way to the moon. And then you said one of those sheets of paper, that's bad. That's kind of the level, that's not even far enough. You're not even getting far enough. That's not even, fine enough. So one sheet of paper out of a stack that goes to the moon they're saying that's the level,
Come
that's
up
the
with a new, that's
concentration.
my illustration. That's what I talk about with the national debt, $30 trillion.
What, a sheet of
national
paper?
debt, 30 trillion. So I'll
using-
trump
no,
your
you're
trillion.
using this?
I'm trumping your trillion. National debt, 30 trillion.
30
Okay,
trillion.
but, okay, so they must think that this is a real bad chemical.
Well, I gave you the health advisory in here, and they say it's, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to read through it, and it says it's got some issues. It could be cancerogenic, it could be, or carcinogenic, it could, cause developmental issues.
At this level?
That's what they're saying. And that's why I gave you the health advisory, the fact sheet, and then in the back is the Code of Federal Regulations that the advisor was actually posted in. And that was posted, I think, earlier this week. It was June 21st, 2022. You'll see it's a 2-page sheet that talks about the health advisory level that US EPA put out.
So there's 2 courses of action that we lobby the governor of the Ohio EPA saying we think this is unreasonable, or we try to come up with, but it's not coming from us. So it's not coming from our treatment plant. You're just saying that it's somewhere in the water system, some manufacturer, somebody had a barrel of something that had it in it, and somehow, a gallon of that seeped into the water system somehow?
I'll give you an example. It could be some, because some of these chemicals are found in the aquifer of the Little Miami River, because when you look at like hits along the river in very low amounts, you'll see this chemical in a lot of the production water along the treatment plants along the Little Miami River. So you'll see it maybe down south of us, up north of us. We're not the only ones that have gotten hits of this chemical, all right? And it could be something as simple as a firefight, some fire department used fighting foam up north, And, you know, by using that foam, because this chemical does not break down in the environment. So that chemical seeped into the aquifer and has slowly made its way down the aquifer. Or it got into the river and then the water percolates into the aquifer and has gotten into such low concentrations that you're getting these hits. So it could be something like that, where, you know, you had a fire
It's
department.
nothing we're doing at the plant.
Oh, no.
There's nothing we're doing. So somewhere in the
absolutely not.
system, it's seeped into the ground, and that source, the original source out of the ground, has come up through our system where we treat the water,
And-
and it just got through, and there's a couple of drops per
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
We currently
It's-
cannot treat for these chemicals.
So the technology we're putting in, the membrane nanofiltration, will remove this chemical, but it's not, the way we're gonna run it is we're not gonna be able to remove all of it. So it'll help us reduce the concentration that goes out in our system, but it's not gonna remove all the chemical, because we're not softening all
That
the way
sounds like a
down to
very
zero.
technical thing. I mean, why don't you put that in some sort of level or letter to the Ohio EPA and just explain what you're explaining to us and say, from a practical standpoint, what do you want us to do? We've invested blank, blank, and blank. We have industry-high standards, but yet somewhere in the system, this obviously is trickled in. And
Their hands are tied, Commissioner Young, because this is not coming from Ohio EPA. This is coming from US EPA. So, in a
I
sense.
thought when you said Governor DeWine had it all tested, that it was coming from.
Because there was a big concern that happened in, 3 years ago with, the city of
Flood
Dayton
issue.
water. And then, that was a huge concern, and so he went through and had everybody's water tested. So, this has been on the radar for years, and now it's finally coming to the forefront.
Okay, so this is a chemical that is introduced into the environment by industry, by human beings. It's not a naturally occurring.
No, it is not.
All right, so one of the things that obviously they must be trying to control it with is how it's put into the environment in the first place. So they've got to have regulations on that. And then, of course, what you're saying is that we've tested the water, and so we're over the amount that the federal EPA is dictating that we've got to do something about, right?
Yes,
And so
we have one
the
chemical.
Ohio EPA is not going to have any choice about this. They're going to have to comply with the federal EPA standards. Okay, and so how expensive is it for us to deal with this?
Yeah, this just came out last week. I don't have a cost as far as what it would take us, and I don't know what the final
Because
standards.
You don't even know how to treat it.
I don't know what the standards are gonna be. They're gonna come out with those standards, in the fall this year. They'll throw out what they think that standard should be. Maybe we'll meet that standard, maybe we won't. We'll have to see. I just wanted to bring this up on your radar to make sure that you're aware of this coming down the road. I don't think there's any action we're looking to take at this
Yeah,
point.
because as clean and as much money as we've put into the system, and we've almost had unlimited checks of making sure this is top tier. Not every community can do this. So if it's showing up in ours, in this, one sheet of paper between here and the moon, it's gonna be happening pretty much everywhere. And most communities aren't in the same position we are to do literally anything to make sure we're safe and clean and all that type of stuff. A lot of people aren't in that position, so I would think 9 out of 10 communities are not gonna be in a position to do anything about this anyway.
Right.
And that's why there is mass tort litigation at class action level that these communities are joining to try to combat this and their future costs to deal with these regulations. I have been contacted multiple times in the last year and a half, 2 years, about the county being interested in joining it, and Chris at that point didn't really have PFAS on his radar, and I don't know if that changes, but I just want to let you know that that is going on.
So that's exactly, so it's new administration, new regulations, new this, and communities that are actually affected by this saying this is an unfunded mandate that we don't even know how to combat. It's not really a problem.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a source, as Commissioner Grossman was trying to inquire about. There's a deep pocket somewhere that these class action litigators are going to get their hooks into. But it's a lot of governmental entities that are being solicited to join this class action.
So it's not trying to stop the EPA from doing this. This is going after a manufacturer of this chemical, but like you said, it could be used in fire suppression stuff.
Oh, it's, you
there's
read
tons of
the
litigation
health
for that.
advisory, it's used in a ton of different things. It's used in your Scotch Guard, it's used in pizza boxes, it's used in a ton of different things. So, yeah, it's been used for the last 30, 40 years.
It's used in pizza boxes?
That's what I've been told.
So your pizza doesn't burn through the box.
So,
Okay. Apparently it doesn't get into the pizza though.
I don't know.
All right, well, that's another food group we eat pizza.
Really?
So just wanted to bring you up to
It's on our
speed
radar,
that
thank you. We don't-
in before you make
we'll have additional discussions on this, I'm sure, as the year goes on. And then, that's all the slides I had. I wanted to give you a real quick update as far as a topic that came up a couple months ago about online payments and trying to open up additional online payment options for our customers. And we've made progress on that with the help of Ben Clift and his group. We've looked at 4 different vendors, and I think we've narrowed it down onto one vendor, which is Paya, P-A-Y-A, and First Billing. So we're moving forward with an amendment or a contract with Paya to allow our customers to have more online payment options. So right now, we have very limited options. This will be an opportunity for customers to pay and set it up account on their website so that they can automatically have their bills paid through this, either through automatic check withdrawal through banks or through credit cards. So just want to let you know that we're going to have some options for our customers here. It'll help us out. It'll probably reduce our mail that we have come in and that we have to process. Moving to online payments is always good. So,
Then also, I had a discussion, just to put it on the board's radar, I had a discussion with Chris last week. He is having serious staffing issues in his office. And I said, it's kind of mission critical. I would say, come up with a plan, bring it to commissioners. We have to fill some positions there. And if we have to raise pay rates, so be it, in my opinion, because your department can't fail. And we can't be losing operators and things like that to other communities, because this is mission critical, and we know in reality that if someone leaves us and we have to backfill that, a lot of cases we're going to pay even more than what we just lost out the door.
I think that makes sense, but I would apply that to all of our staff. I think all of our staff is mission critical. They're all experiencing challenges in the departments. The inflation is hitting everyone, and we can't continue to keep recruiting and training people for them to leave and go other places. So I think it should be a more holistic conversation with all of our employees about how we retain their service. Our employees are what makes this county run, and I think this is a perfect time to have this conversation.
And I will say compensation for the water department as well as children's services is on your executive session list specific. Chris has come up with some options relative to the operation of his front office that he will be implementing. I'll forward those to you in the short term till we can get some staff hired and in the process. But I agree with Commissioner Jones that this is a topic that has been broached to Martin and myself. We've been running some scenarios relative to options to present to the commissioners relative to what we're currently seeing in most of your departments. I look back pre-pandemic and I will tell you we virtually had no positions unfilled. We currently have several, and the water department is experiencing something that they've never
Yeah.
experienced, both in their treatment, water, sewer, as well as their front office. So it is quite concerning, so those things will be brought forward in terms of compensation specifically to those departments, as well as in the future, bringing forward other options relative to your other departments.
Okay, I appreciate it. No, it's been challenging times. This is definitely different than I've ever seen before in the last 20 years.
Well, I mean, again, it's kudos to our department head, Chris Broush, but it's also a sad state. I walked into his office kind of unannounced last week, and he was literally opening the mail, which is, you know, that's great that somebody does that, but it should not be a situation where our chief engineer is literally opening the mail, because there's no one else to do it. So we need to fix that.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. All right, Matt, you're next.
So much for not giving them 30 minutes, Tom.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how we, I think we caused that.
So, good morning, Commissioners. Back today to continue the conversation around broadband, the fiber expansion that's being contemplated with the ARPA funds. Since the last work session, at the last work session, the board had authorized the county administrator to enter into an agreement with Morley to come on for consultancy services and drafting an RFP that would go out for issuance. We've done that and have had a handful of meetings now with Morley. With me today is Jeremy Elrod. Oh, there he is. With Morley, he came over today to kind of walk through some high-level things. But we've put together a draft of that RFP that's in pretty near final form, but wanted to get some feedback from you all today. You should have had a copy of the draft RFP in your packet. A handful of questions that maybe I wanted to run over. I'll do so in a minute, and then I was going to invite Jeremy up to give you some highlights of what's included in the RFP currently, as well as just walk through sort of the timeline of what we could expect, you know, once we get it out to issue. So first and foremost, there's probably about 4 questions that I think we had identified as outstanding. The first would be, as we go through this process, how involved the board wants to be directly in this. I know when we did the RFQ for consultancy services earlier, you all had assigned a review committee, and we did the review and came back with recommendations. We can go that route again. The board can take a more direct role and conduct, you know, interviews and things like that, once again, if desired. But we're just kind of curious your all's desire of how intimately involved you want to be versus how much you'd like to assign out to a review committee again.
Personally, I'd like some direction on, as I see it, because again, I think I was one of the biggest advocates of let's hire a consultant to do this because we don't need to go do all of this ourselves when the Spectrums or AT&T or Cincinnati Bells were trying to, hey, contract with us, let us do it. When it's no, let's let them compete. Let's let them come in with their own money. It's not just we're going to get this, because one of the providers actually said, you spend this much money, this is how big we can build it for you. No, the model is, here's how much money we have. Now, how much of your money are you going to put in and how big can we make it? And these folks were the only ones that were really kind of talking about going down that path and helping us navigate that, which was all well and good at the time. Since then, my question to the expert is, has the world changed? I don't know, from what I'm being told by some of my federal friends, I don't know that we want to continue to do this at all, because the federal government in the state is saying, we are going to do this. We're doing it. Warren County, you don't have to do this because this is coming and it's front burner. There's money there. We're doing it. Period, end of story. So help convince me, why do we need to spend any of these ARPA dollars, or whatever they're called, that on this particular subject, if there's hundreds of billions or whatever it is coming from the federal government specifically tied to address this need? So I'd like that question, at least from my perspective, answered first before we get into the logistics of how do we want this to proceed. my question is, do we want it to proceed at all under those confines or that construct that the federal government's in the middle of this?
Yeah, I mean, feel free, feel free to.
Morning, Commissioners. Jeremy Elrod, Morley. Good seeing y'all again. To that point, I think, let's start the discussion there. From our perspective, and I talked to Matt a little bit about this, their times have changed since the last time I stood at this podium. From the, I'll say from the ARPA standpoint, like I was telling Matt, I think a lot of, at least two we've spoken with, are in the same boat. Even when I stood here last, y'all had a lot of questions about where we're from, the Vanderburgh County project, big $40 million project, ARPA funded. Even that project, 6 months ago when it went in front of its council for appropriation, same exact question got posed by council. The crystal ball was a little less clear then. It's getting clearer. There's still, I'll say, lack of clarity to an extent there. Ultimately, history goes that project got funded, got approved, and it's turned out to be, as Vanderburgh County sees it, wildly successful. They feel like they're a front runner, a pioneer in the endeavor to bring broadband to their community. And so I don't know if I have a great question for you. I'm here to give, I'll say, the best counsel from my experience, not trying to sell you into ARPA or waiting on other programs. I talked briefly with Matt, actually just a second ago in the back. We have, I'll say morally, we are well versed in ARPA as the new infrastructure programs roll out. You're probably well aware of this. There's a big stack. I mean, there's 400 plus programs. We have started to thumb through those. There are a few. There's one specifically that comes to mind. I sat halfway through a webinar before I got distracted last week. Anyways, that's the Reconnect program through USDA. Is one of the few programs we've seen that local municipalities can go out and get funding directly, similar to ARPA, I would say. Otherwise, from what we've heard and who we've worked with and other people that advise on these types of issues, is a lot of that money will go through the states and go through state-funded programs, which is great. But unlike ARPA, you guys are, for lack of better terms, you're sitting on that money now. You control it. You decide which direction we want to steer it, what we want to do with it. That changes a little when you go through a state program. Not to say it's bad. We've worked through projects there too. And so, again, my crystal ball's not any clearer than y'all's. But ultimately, I think it's a question of, does the county want to get out in front of this? Do they want to let private industry kind of take hold, get that funding themselves, let that competitive world, I'll say, organically grow in the county? Or, you have ARPA money now, and we're partially through a process to get that going relatively soon. We were on, I think, mid-August, actually late August, getting RFPs back. So you could, in theory, have a project around September-ish time. But with a different program, I'm not sure what that timing does for you. In the industry, y'all just talked about staff compensation. It's in every industry. It's in private industry just as much. Even our big project in Vanderburgh County with AT&T, they made a large procurement of fiber to ensure that project happened. They didn't have supply chain issues. And I'm not an economics major, but I got to imagine that eventually fiber shortage and labor workforce, that stuff's going to catch up on the back
But what
end.
I hear you saying is that the benefit to us for being engaged, it's all federal dollars. It's not our general fund, it's all federal dollars that we, by participating in it, we have an opportunity to have a voice at the table that's unique and distinct, that's Warren County, that can help either accelerate or encourage private investment to leverage federal dollars and to more specifically be able to address very specific, unique needs into this county, correct?
That's a fair statement, yes.
And so where we have incumbent providers in parts of this community who will tell us that areas, and some of our areas have at the highest level of coverage, we've all looked at the maps, but we know in reality that doesn't happen because there isn't really competition there or the service is really subpar. this is a chance for us on behalf of our residents and businesses to, again, put some emphasis on these areas where the market has failed to do that, correct?
Yes, and I think that's a true statement, and, again, I've probably echoed this in some fashion many times, but I think you'll never get the flexibility with any other program that you currently have with your American Rescue Plan funding.
And so I think from at least my standpoint, the big advantage for us is really to kind of take advantage of this unique opportunity where there are going to be lots of federal dollars invested in this community to have a role in shaping what that looks like with federal dollars. But our concern, or my concern, is always wanting to do it in a way that doesn't overbuild or duplicate efforts. We're not looking to do that, but I think what I am interested and have always been interested in is having a voice in the destiny of where this growing technology goes in the county. Is continuing down on this process going to give us at least some ability to both have a say in what happens in this county and also understand, you know, to avoid that kind of duplication of effort or waste in the process?
Sure, yeah, and with the flexibility of your ARPA funding, I mean, there are still rules and requirements, and so the county, we can definitely steer folks a particular way, ultimately they have to meet thresholds that don't currently exist, and so, and then we can get to details later, talking through what available funding the county may have. I don't think you're in a position you're gonna overbuild the county, so to speak. I get duplicating efforts, especially maybe in the southwestern portion of the county, only to say the infrastructure money's coming and there will be future opportunities for broadband projects as well. Maybe you hit the home run this time and that, you know, that's what we all want, but maybe you don't. Maybe it's a smaller project, maybe it's a project more focused on a rural area that desperately needs it, you know, and you can do a future broadband project with infrastructure money. But I do think what you're describing, Commissioner, you have that ability with the ARPA funding you currently hold.
Yeah, and I think one other point that I'd like to add is that in the RFP, the way that Jeremy and his team have written it is, it specifically requests that these private providers try to bring not only their private capital dollars, but also other sources of federal funding and leverage that they could bring, because, you know, to Jeremy's point, a lot of this money that'll come down from the federal through the states, it's ultimately going to be dispersed out to the private providers directly. So if they could leverage the county's ARPA investment, their own private investment, and then another from one of these other myriad of federal programs that's coming down, if they can bring that to the table, I think that's kind of the hope, is to marry all of those sources together to get a much larger investment on top of what, you know, whatever the county would put in.
Yeah, I read the RFP in the packet, and I confess that a lot of it I don't necessarily, you know, understand, but you know, we obviously had confidence in you to want to help us figure this out. And from my standpoint, it's less about what is the particular project or projects, but it's more about having a voice in not only what happens in this project, but what happens in the entire county and the speed with which we're able to move those opportunities along. I mean, there are billions of dollars that are going to be invested in this precise thing. You know, I'd like for us to be able to have a say in this county how they're being invested and to leverage as many opportunities as we can, as quick as we can, so that we're leading on this effort, as opposed to on the back end, other communities are ahead of us, and we're left with all of the problems of the supply chain, or all the challenges of workforce and dwindling resources. I mean, I don't know what $5 million or whatever the amount gets us, but it seems to me it gets us in a serious conversation with all of these other things, and that's worth doing.
Yeah, and on that, and, of course, I think I've shown, we're an advocate for this ARPA-funded project, but in a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, if we're blessed as we have been, we'll be helping on those projects too. And so, well, like I said, I think there will be more broadband projects done by Warren County. But I think if you want an immediate impact, this is the way. Again, we can go through schedules, all goes well, you could be negotiating a contract in September and they could be breaking ground 4 to 6 months later. There's a lot of questions answered before we get there. And so I think that would put you in front of a lot of other communities, but it doesn't shut the door on future broadband investments that will happen. I think ultimately the federal government, their goal is to give the whole country broadband, and that's great, and maybe we'll get there. Eventually, as billions of dollars go to states, I think those thresholds will relax as far as from a competition standpoint. They may come in and say you're only eligible if you don't have a provider here, and through a project like this, we may have a provider. I think eventually those requirements will roll back naturally. It'll become more of a competitive market where you don't want a sole provider.
But you're theorizing about things in the future. There
For
are
sure.
dollars right now that are directed to this. It's coming, that are outside of ARPA.
Yes.
That is true, and so the other, I want to say point, the other thing I was also going to just state is that some of these other programs, and I will be the first to admit I'm not familiar with all of them, but some of these programs, like for example, in the Reconnect program that USDA is putting on, they haven't even opened up. They don't even know when they're going to open up for applications. They just posted fourth quarter 2022 to say when they're going to start receiving applications. So they're still figuring out those programs as we speak. And so that was my only point to the crystal ball and how clear it is. Will there be programs? For sure. Is there money for broadband? Yes, that's the goal. Don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my hands around.
Sure.
Again, we were given this absolute garbage money, $46 million, that 100% is contributing to our 8.6% inflation rate right now as a country. And I literally feel sick to my stomach that I'm participating in spending $1 of it. But if we don't spend it, somebody else is. So, with that being the backdrop, my full disclosure, I hate this. I really do. But, so now we've got $46 million here. Now we're going to say, oh, let's allocate $5 or $6 million of that to this project that's very worthwhile. That's, again, even though we're at what, 96, 98% coverage, some of it's not as good as it should be, even with some of that coverage. But admittedly, there's, let's say 5% of the county that's completely unserved, but yet, and there's some percentage of the county that is limited service or not as optimal service. So is there a need for that? 100%, yes. But it carries a heck of a lot of weight with me when a United States Senator's chief advisor told me flat out, don't spend your money on this. It's coming. Right now, we're doing this. And that carried weight with me. And so I'm in this world of, okay, so here's 46 million, let's carve out 5 or 6 million, whatever the number was, to go to this very worthwhile project. In the back of my mind is, well, okay, there's lots of other things this $5 or $6 million could be spent on here in the county to go address blank issue. If this other garbage pot of federal dollars that's now coming in, that's going to be targeted to fix that exact same thing, that we have no discretion on that. That's the only thing I'm reconciling is this $5 or $6 million we do have discretion on.
Sure.
There's going to be other investments to address this very need that I'm being told is coming, and it's not a year or two or whatever, it's coming like, it's part of that bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's been approved, that's coming. It's just how they and again, I'm no expert either. I don't know how it's coming, but when I'm told, don't do this, that carries a lot of weight with me.
Oh, and I think that's, your job as the leaders of the community to get that information and advise on it. I don't necessarily doubt your source, doubt your information. Like I said, you know, my crystal ball's as clear as y'all's. Yours is probably a little clearer knowing the folks you do. So I do agree with that, and I do just, so you guys have as much information at your fingertips in our homework on this and preparing this RFP. You do, I think, the number I had was closer to 7%, but you're about 5-7% of your county that I would say desperately needs some form of broadband internet. But I would say the other 95% has what I'll call, I should choose my terms carefully, have good modern download speeds. They're just missing the upload. They don't hit the priority mark that ARPA has, but as far as can they likely get on, you know, and do an online class or something, they probably have that ability. But I wouldn't say your county is future-proofed for, you know, where the world is going with broadband.
Come to not my neighborhood, and we'll show you what 95% looks like.
And that's from day one. Last time I was here talking about the maps and you know the weight they have. So I understand that those are. But I just wanted to share that with y'all because y'all have a big decision to make. So.
Right, I mean, there is an advantage, I see that, of if we spend, we're first in line, we're doing it, it's full steam ahead, it's important, it's critically important to a certain percentage of our population where there's no service or underserved, I 100% get that. So we're accelerating, we're getting first in line or what have you, or doing it now versus a few, I don't think it's a few years from now, it's a few months from now, is what I'm hearing, is this stuff's coming.
I personally think it'll be a few years.
Yeah, I mean, we aren't first in line. I mean, the state, a lot of this money, it flows through the state, and the state has diverted lots of these resources, and I'm concentrating them into the Appalachian region of the state. I'm not disputing the policy rationale for doing that, but we don't get to decide. The state is making those decisions as to where those dollars are being deployed. My only point has been all along, which is if we're willing to put some resources into the game and have a voice in that conversation, and it brings providers to the table to creatively think about how they're using their private capital as well as their access to some of these other pools to do something that gets us perhaps in, you know, closer to being able to address the considerations in the county. You know, and I want to be really clear here, like, you know, many of us in the county have real inconveniences with the lack of build out in our communities, but they are inconveniences. My first interest is in wanting to cover those areas that have zero access, even crappy access that many of us have. And so, you know, like, it is true those dollars are flowing. It is true there are projects that are underway, but it isn't coming to this community. And when you look at our maps that appear based on how they're judging these things, that there is lots of coverage, I'd say it's gonna be a really long time before anybody in the state prioritizes these areas.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that statement, and I don't, maybe to suggest something here, I mean, where we're at in this RFP, I think we were hoping to, if with approval, of course, 2 to 3 weeks, publish it. It'd be a 6-week bid turnaround time, again, late August when we'd take proposals, unless legal has a different opinion. I mean, this RFP's structured, y'all don't have to take a project on.
We don't have to take anything. We don't like what we see, or we don't think it's.
I mean, you don't even have to appropriate the money. You know, we need to give them some parameters. That's how we're gonna get the best proposals. But we can proceed with this process, and there is no commitment on the county's behalf to enter into a contract, to award a contract, to further negotiations, none of that. So I just want to make that clear too.
Paul, you're our chief technical person. You got any thoughts on this?
I'm looking forward to, seeing the project. I understand your thoughts on the dollars. I think anybody can do it better than the federal government that we can. And so I'd rather not them come in. I'm afraid that they're gonna only try to fill in the splotches that don't have any coverage, and then the rest of the, like Commissioner Jones is not gonna see any improvement on those projects down, because it's a big country and it's gonna take a lot of money to cover everybody. And I just don't, I see it washing out, and I don't see it being what we were looking forward to, which is fiber everywhere and broadband speeds throughout the county. So that's just my 2 cents, that we have the opportunity to seize it now and and ride the wave before it flattens out and becomes just noise. With the federal government, I don't trust that they can do it as well as we can.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, I don't know if that fully answers your question, Commissioner Young. I mean, I think that's obviously, before we proceed any further, that's something that we will need direction on from the board on, of, do we want to move forward? Do we want to push pause for a while? Obviously, we need to figure that out first and foremost, but then from there, if the decision would be to move forward, there are just a handful of other questions we would want to seek guidance on to get the RFP into finalized form.
I mean, we've already entered into a contract for the consulting services. I don't see what the harm is in following through with the RFP. There's no requirement that says we have to take any of those. We'll be able to evaluate them on their face and can make that determination. I mean, it's certainly true that, everything's a trade-off, right? So if we commit resources here, that means we have fewer resources to commit somewhere else. And so, that's fair for us to be asking that question. But I feel like we've already crossed the Rubicon. You're getting paid whether we do an RFP or not, so we might as well take advantage of the fact and see what comes forward. That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my recommendation as well.
Say,
but-
for full disclosure, if you guys pull the plug, then you don't get charged the full amount, let's put it that way.
No, but it's a valid point that in this process where it is a fluid, changing environment, a matter of a few weeks or a couple of months could be a long time in this process. And that even though we say yes to you and going out and getting the ball rolling, we still have discretion of, if we gather real information, someone from the state, someone from that knows what the heck they're talking about, isn't guessing, of saying, oh no, we've got $50 million earmarked for Warren County, and that's coming, and our timeline, we might just not know that yet. And
that's a very true statement. We worked with a city in southern Indiana. Very similar happened with their statewide program, Next Level Connections, what they coined it. I think it was, maybe, I don't know if it was a full week before our proposals were due, they had announced that they were going to make the announcement of awarded projects, which would have directly affected the local community and what the providers there got in grant money. So you're 100% correct in that statement that this could change midstream. It's going to stay fluid. I think it'll be fluid for a few years. So
yeah, I guess I don't have a problem with moving forward with gathering information under the caveat that we really might not pull the trigger on this. Because again, I've got serious reservations on whether we do this or not.
Yeah, well, and to Jeremy's point earlier, if we move forward, finalize this, put it out to bid, receive bids, I mean, we are still, as of right now, kind of tracking on about roughly a late August timeline, which is another 2 months. before we would have bids, back and received. And at that time, if the board doesn't receive anything that they want, you would have the option to reject all and cancel it at that time. But you never know. We may get something that kind of knocks the socks off and hits all the points that we wanted to hit.
Okay, well, look, is the eligibility requirements, the specifications that they have to meet the RFP request?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Page 4, is that it?
Oh,
Yes, that's correct, and that ensures that any contract you enter into is going to be eligible for funding through your rescue plan funds.
But this is what they're bidding to.
I think
bid,
this,
I think it's a-
that would be
Well,
just,
that's what their requirements are to.
I'll say the
meet
technical
these
standards,
criteria.
yes.
Right.
yeah, so I mean, a couple of the other, I mentioned wanting to know how directly involved the board wants to be, if y'all would want to designate a review committee. And again, I'll have to probably rely a little bit more on legal to correct me, but from what I gather is, if the review committee is established, the process is that review committee does the review, conducts it, comes back with a recommendation. At that time, the board would either have to accept that recommendation or reject, essentially reject all of the bids. Or if you all wanted to do it in more of a similar situation to what occurred with the RFQ, you could do the scoring directly and we could schedule interviews to come in.
100%, my opinion is, if we get to that point, the board should be involved. I think we should have technical people involved with us, but this is potentially a ginormous project for the county, with a lot of public sector dollars going into play. I would want to have a say in that.
Okay. Yeah, and so we could structure it that way where the board will do the scoring directly, and Adam, correct me, I think that has to be done in a public setting, correct?
That's correct. You could score them, yeah, you have to do it publicly. And the board's done that in the past, just on some of these more technical things. Sometimes you have, say with a water and sewer project or engineering project, something you haven't. But on this one, that was our concern exactly, that this might be something that this board really wants to be directly involved in, because it's sort of a big item for the county if it goes this route. And you can also adjust your scores after you get presentations. So you can do sort of an initial scoring, invite some people in to answer questions. You can adjust that after you've gotten more information from them. So I think that would be advantageous for this project. Otherwise, I get the sense that if we did a scoring, it might not be the same as what the commissioners would want or how you would view it. So it'd be easier, I think, if the commissioners did.
And in addition to internal staff, that's something that's within the scope of Morley's contract for them to be here to assist with that scoring as well, to answer questions that you all might have. Okay, so that'll answer that question. Further down was, I guess, Jeremy alluded to it, but it was the amounts. We do want to be able to put in a firm amount in the RFP so that providers know what they're responding to. I know historically, just based off of the framework, we've always kind of discussed that 5 million figure. I just wanted to be sure if that's still where the board stood on the amount that we would want to offer forth, or if there was any adjustments to be made to that up or down.
And I would say firm is possible. It's not a commitment of any funds, but we definitely want, we don't want to tell them 10 million and they give us a great project and we say, well, we really didn't have 10 million. We just wanted to know what we could get for 10 million. But an amount does go a long way. It'll be the first and number one question we get asked.
But wasn't the amount based upon an allocation when we were looking at the total amount of funds that we have available, and then we were allocating them in different
In the
pockets?
framework.
That's correct.
And so that's where this was coming from. So any adjustment we make in that, we have to make an adjustment in some other area.
Okay.
So and then again, I don't even know how much this buys. And is the comment on this eligibility requirements, what does it mean when it says open access requirements? There are no requirements for open access related to this RFP. What does that mean?
So open access would be a public system that would be that they're building infrastructure that the county would
Or we
then
would
own and operate.
It would be a Cincinnati Bell system, and
Well, you guys
it'd have to
own
be
the fiber
Cincinnati
line
Bell
and you would
customers.
lease it to AT&T Cincinnati Bell, but it would be a county operated facility.
All right, so is what we're buying here something that any provider can have access to?
It would be that any provider has the ability to bid on, and whatever the award is, whether it's one award or multiple awards.
So once we award somebody to do this work, and they put in infrastructure to allow access of customers to broadband services, that ultimately is what's going on here.
Yes.
The focus is going into areas in the county that don't have good service or any service at this point. That's the point. And then if somebody gets this bid and they put in certain infrastructure, is that infrastructure able to be used by all broadband providers or only by the person that got this bid?
It would be only by whoever is awarded. So if an award would go to AT&T, let's say, I mean, it would be an award that would go to AT&T, they would build that out within their own private network, they would manage it, and it would only be eligible for AT&T
And
customers.
if they wanted to let somebody else use it, they could, but that's
Right.
unlikely
They don't
that they
have
would
to,
do
yeah.
that.
Right, yeah, that's.
Our role in this is simply as a grant provider, much like the state of Ohio accepts these proposals and then just provides the funding based upon what they're bringing to the table, who they're going to serve. It will not be a public infrastructure for us in perpetuity to maintain.
This is just some matching public
That's
dollars
correct.
to try to leverage up, that here's our 5 million, here's your 35 million, AT&T or Cincinnati Bell or Spectrum. So here's a $40 million project and you're gonna go lay fiber in these areas, and now there's fiber literally in front of these houses. So now it's up to that individual homeowner. Do I wanna run it in and pay their monthly fee or what have you?
Yeah, and there's also a requirement in here that the providers who respond have to show that they participate in affordability programs that are available for all providers to have, so that way we know that what's being built isn't gonna be cost prohibitive on the back end for customers to use, that they have to show some ability to offer that.
And as part of their proposals, they'll be required to provide their product tiers, so their package pricing. So, do they have, we want fiber, we want gig up, we gig down, but the truth is, maybe every household doesn't want to pay $80 a month for that. So they'll show us, do they have a 50 and 50 package, 100 by 100, and we'll have pricing for that as well. But yes, it'll be an entirely private system. They can propose public, or a leasing scenario, but I doubt you get many proposals that way. The money the county's putting forward is more of an incentive to the private industry to build out in places that economically they wouldn't do, so.
All right.
And then I guess maybe last question is, based off conversation today, it might be something that would be better addressed after we see what responses we receive, but it was the thought of what do we do if the 5 million that's offered out doesn't cover the whole county? Candace and I had done a survey with the local jurisdictions, townships, cities, villages. Almost all of them came back and said that they would be interested in partnering with the county in some form or fashion. Obviously, they didn't lay out any funding commitments or numbers that they would be willing to offer out, but there would be a possibility that if we come up with a gap and we're not able to cover all of the area of the county, we might be able to work with some of our local jurisdictions to fill that gap, and they would contribute some of their ARPA funds as well. How we go about that logistically is probably something we just need to figure out, but that might be best served after we see what bids we
Conversely, we could do the opposite also, go backwards of, okay, 5 million gets us this, but you're gonna be 90% of the beneficiary blank community. We wanna see you come in with 500,000 and we put up 4.5 million and they put up 500 grand or something.
Yeah. Yep, we could do something like that as well. And I know the one really the one main concern that we heard from some of the local jurisdictions was just wanting to be sure that, if Turtle Creek Township invested money, that it wasn't gonna go for a build that was happening in Washington Township or something, something along those lines. So we just have to figure that out. But other than that, I think that gives pretty much good direction on it. The timeline of it, I think we had pegged of, Jeremy kind of mentioned our late August to get bids back. I think we have the completion. We made sure that they know that they have to be complete with construction for sure prior to the ARPA funding statutes so that money can be expended on time. Is there any other feedback or comments that you all want us to have as we finalize this? And then moving forward, what we would do is we'll incorporate some of this feedback. Adam will do a final review from the prosecutor's standpoint, and then there'll probably be a consent agenda item in the next week or so that would come back in front of you to authorize the actual publishing of the RFP.
If I could rate, I have one issue. I think what we were talking about, that the board needs to answer is the RFP looking for countywide municipalities, villages, cities, or is it unincorporated areas of the county only for this project? I don't know if we really answered that question.
I think we had sort of assumed it as a countywide, but it is a good question to answer. I mean, because I think Jeremy had said that in some of their previous projects, some of the other counties had done unincorporated territories only. I remember from initial conversations, I think kind of the vision or the ultimate goal would be to get countywide. I think, at least in my mind, that was how we should present it to the providers, is that's what our end goal is.
Yeah, we have, historically, if we do it with a county, it'd be an unincorporated area, but that's more so because, as you guys are well aware, if you, it's a bad thing, but if you gotta work with the other towns, cities, they've got ARPA money, they're asking the same questions. Do we spend our ARPA now? Are we gonna get infrastructure money? So it brings in a lot of that, and working through that will naturally take some time. So, whereas if it stays unincorporated for this RFP, for lack of better terms, y'all make all the decisions, y'all decide how much, how big the check is, what the project is, negotiating the contract. So it just adds layers. So I think Matt was just trying to get some clarity from you guys as we work on our RFP, again, so we can steer the providers in the right direction.
Well, since we don't have jurisdiction over incorporated areas of the county, but we're allowed to spend this money outside of our typical jurisdictional authority, is the only reason why we would exclude cities and villages is because they have separate ARPA funding where they can also be spending it on these items?
No, I don't think, if you guys want to say, hey, 5 million, and if it covers the entire county, including cities and towns, that's awesome. I think it's more so, as Matt laid out the scenario, if we get a great project and there's a city impact, and you guys look to the city and say, y'all are getting a big chunk of this, do you want to throw in 500,000? I think then there are more conversations, there are more talks. I don't know if they're, interlocal agreements, that's a couple added layers there.
Well, I remember when you were here originally, you had said that if you were in our shoes, you would be bold and say, what is our bold goal? And our bold goal is to have coverage throughout the county. I'd like to see what providers might come back with. We're not hamstrung to anything, sure. But I also think that could be helpful in understanding with more granularity what some of the challenges are in the county and what other players might be willing to come to the table to start addressing those challenges. So, I think it's the tax dollars of everybody who pays federal taxes. I think we should remain with that bold goal and see what we come back with.
And I'm in agreement with that, and I think that doesn't necessarily affect our RFP in a big way. And so our team, y'all will just need to know that if we do start peeling back more layers, that'll take time, and that'll be handled, I'll say, on the back end, so to speak.
I think that's all stuff we address after we see what we receive.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time, for your input, and we'll get that finalized back in front of you.
Thank you.
Okay, before we do a motion for executive session, is there any other matter?
No, I will give the board an update briefly. You asked the question about mileage and running a report and what increasing potentially the mileage reimbursement will cost. The way the system is set up in Munis, you cannot peel out that information to know what we've currently done. So it would be a number that I couldn't provide to you. But if there's still interest in it, we can make a proposal moving forward. I was thinking, I think they increased it to from 58 to 62. We've never been at the IRS rate. I was thinking maybe in the 55 to 58 cents per mile range, if the board would be so inclined to do that. And the other thing that I'll just update you on, Commissioner Young, you asked what the cost per call was in our emergency services, which I did provide to all the communities when I sent out the SPUR report, and it's roughly $17.59 per call. So that's, I think, a real value to the communities. And that's all that I have in terms of an update from previous asks.
All right, and, all right, before we make a motion on the executive session matter, since we've got to make sure we get everything covered, if I'd like to add something to that, to deal with pending litigation, can we do that, Bruce?
Yes.
And do we have to specify then that I want to go into executive session for pending litigation as well as for personnel matters relative to hiring and compensation in children's services in the water sewer department?
With two notations, one that you are, would be adjourning into executive session to discuss with an attorney present,
Yes.
the pending litigation. And then secondly, on the hiring and compensation, it needs to be related to an employee or employees. As mentioned earlier by Commissioner Young and Commissioner Jones, this holistic concept is not what's going to be discussed today. That would be discussed in a public work session in the future, not an executive session.
That's correct. These are specific employees in water and sewer and children's services.
Okay, so I would then entertain a motion to go into executive session based upon the comments you all heard. Do we need to make that motion more specific?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to go into executive sessions for pending litigation with an attorney present and personnel matters related to specific compensation in children's services and water and sewer.
And hiring.
And hiring, yes. Okay, is that sufficient?
Roll call vote.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes?
Mr. Young?
Yes.